The Vrexian battlecruiser shuddered as Commander Kale's claws dug into the armrest. The human vessel had finally stopped resisting. 3 cycles of pursuit across 2 star systems, and now the primitive ship floated dead in space, its engines venting plasma into the void. "Bring the survivor aboard," Kale ordered, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "The Galactic Council will pay handsomely for a live specimen." The human was dragged through the airlock 20 minutes later, hands bound behind his back with energy restraints. He was young, maybe 30 cycles by human standards, with dark hair matted with sweat and blood trickling from a cut above his left eye. His uniform bore the insignia of Earth's Deep Space Reconnaissance Corps. "Name?" Kale demanded, leaning forward on his command throne. The human met his gaze without flinching. "Lieutenant Jake Morrison, serial number 77329. Kale's translator struggled with the defiant tone. Humans were supposed to be fragile, weak-willed creatures who cowered before superior species. This one stood straight despite his injuries, his jaw set in a way that spoke of barely contained rage rather than fear. "You attacked a Vrexian patrol ship," Kale continued. "Your species was warned to stay within your designated zone. You have violated interstellar law." Jake's lips pulled back in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Your patrol ship crossed into Earth's territory first. We defended ourselves." A subordinate officer, Vren, stepped forward. "Commander, the human ship contained advanced weapon systems. Technology beyond what Earth should possess." Kale's eyes narrowed. The Galactic Council had been very specific. Humanity was a developing species, restricted to slower-than-light travel and projectile weapons. They were prey, nothing more, useful for labor, experimentation, and political leverage. "Where did you get those weapons?" Kale hissed. Jake said nothing. Wren struck him across the face. The human's head snapped to the side, and he spat blood onto the deck plating. When he looked up again, that same cold defiance burned in his eyes. "Throw him in detention cell 4, Kale ordered. "Set course for Vrexia Prime. The Council will want to interrogate him personally. Perhaps they'll be more persuasive than we are." As the guards hauled Jake away, Kale watched the human's retreating form. Something about the way Morrison moved bothered him. There was no panic, no desperation, just calculation, like a predator waiting for the right moment. Kale dismissed the thought. Humans were weak. The galaxy had proven that fact for 200 cycles. One specimen, no matter how stubborn, couldn't change reality. The commander turned back to his view screen, already composing his report to the Council. He didn't notice Jake Morrison glance back once, his eyes scanning the bridge layout, counting guards, measuring distances. The human was learning. They took the human as a captive, not knowing he would become their .txt. The detention cell was a cube of translucent energy barriers, 3 meters on each side. Jake sat cross-legged in the center, eyes closed, breathing steady. The Vrexians had stripped him of his uniform jacket and boots, leaving him in a black undershirt and tactical pants. They'd missed the thin wire sewn into his belt and the microtool hidden in the hollow of his back molar. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Jake didn't open his eyes. "Interesting," the new voice said. Female, higher pitched than Kale's guttural rasp. "Most humans weep by now. You meditate." Jake opened one eye. A Vrexian stood beyond the barrier, smaller than the others he'd seen, with lighter gray scales and amber eyes instead of the standard crimson. She wore a science officer's insignia. "Dr. Zara," she introduced herself. "I study your species. Fascinating creatures. So fragile, yet you spread across your star system like a virus." "We prefer the term explorers," Jake replied, opening both eyes now. Zara tilted her head, a gesture Jake recognized as Vexian curiosity. "You're different from other humans we've captured. There's no fear sent." "Your heart rate is normal. Why?" Jake stood slowly, stretching his shoulders. "Because I've read your species profile. You're ambush predators who evolved in low-gravity swamps. Your bones are hollow like birds. Your strength comes from exoskeletons, not muscle mass. And your ships run on fusion cores with terrible heat dissipation. Zara's eyes widened. How do you know our ship specifications? Same way I know you're approaching the Vrexian home system right now. Jake walked to the barrier, close enough to see his reflection in her amber eyes. Same way I know your detention cells run on independent power grids that cycle every 6 hours for maintenance. Same way I know Earth didn't violate anything. You've been kidnapping our people for decades. The science officer's scales rippled, a sign of distress. The council will execute you for this knowledge. They'll try. Jake smiled, and this time it was genuine. Dr. Zara, how many humans have you studied? 43 specimens over 12 cycles. And how many fought back during capture? Zara hesitated. None survived long enough to be studied. They died in initial confrontations. Wrong answer. Jake's voice dropped lower. The right question is, how many chose to fight? We've lost 317 people to Vrexian raids. Every single one transmitted data before they died. Ship layouts, weapon frequencies, biological weaknesses. We've been waiting for one of you to take someone alive. Someone trained to the color drained from Zara's scales. You let yourself be captured. Bait needs to look convincing. Jake touched the energy barrier with one finger, feeling it hum against his skin. Tell me, Doctor, how well do you think your people will react when they discover humans aren't prey anymore? Alarms shrieked through the ship. Red emergency lights bathed the corridor in crimson. Zara spun toward the sound as an explosion rocked the battlecruiser hard enough to knock her off balance. Jake remained perfectly still, centered in his cell, smiling. Right on schedule, he said. Kale's voice roared over the intercom. All stations battle alert. Multiple human vessels have dropped out of hyperspace. I repeat, human vessels with hyperspace capability. This is impossible. Zara looked at Jake with something approaching horror. Your species doesn't have faster-than-light travel. We didn't. Jake's smile widened. We do now. Turns out when you kidnap enough of our engineers and scientists, eventually one of them figures out how to reverse engineer your technology from the inside of a detention cell. Took us 40 years, but humans are patient when we're angry. Another explosion. Closer this time, the lights flickered. Those weapons on my ship weren't advanced, Jake continued. They were standard issue. Every Earth vessel has them now. We've been building a fleet while your council assumed we were still crawling around our own solar system. Surprise. The energy barrier containing Jake flickered, then died. Emergency power redistribution. He'd counted on that. Zara reached for her communicator, but Jake was already moving. 3 steps forward, one hand chopping down on her wrist. The communicator clattered to the floor. He caught her before she could scream. One hand over her mandibles. I'm not going to hurt you, he said quietly. But I need you to understand something. Humanity doesn't forget. We don't forgive species that treat us like laboratory animals, but we do negotiate. He released her and stepped back. Zara stumbled away, pressing against the far wall. When this is over, Jake said, some of your people will survive. Make sure you're one of them. Make sure you remember this moment. Remember that humans became dangerous the day you decided we were helpless. He turned and walked toward the corridor, bare feet silent on the metal deck. Behind him, Zara watched the human disappear into the chaos of the dying ship, and for the first time in her life, she understood what terror felt like. They took the human as a captive. Not knowing he would become their .txt, the Vrexian battlecruiser's corridor strobed with emergency lighting as Jake moved through the smoke. Explosions rattled the hull, plating every few seconds. He could hear crew members scrambling, their clawed feet scraping against metal in panic. He pressed himself against a wall as 3 Vrexian soldiers rushed past, too focused on reaching their battle stations to notice the barefoot human in the shadows. Jake counted to 5, then continued forward. His internal map of the ship was accurate so far. Detention level, 2 decks below the armory, 4 decks below the bridge. He needed weapons. He needed communications. He needed to link up with the assault team. A door panel ahead glowed green, unlocked in the chaos. Jake slipped through into what looked like a medical bay. Equipment lined the walls, some of it recognizably surgical, some utterly alien. In the center of the room stood a cylindrical tank filled with blue liquid. Jake froze. Suspended in the liquid was a human woman, unconscious, breathing apparatus covering her face. Tubes ran from her arms and spine into monitoring equipment. Her head had been partially shaved, and Jake could see the glint of metal implants along her skull. Rage flooded through him, hot and immediate. He forced it down, channeled it into cold calculation. There would be time for anger later. He found the tank's control panel and started pressing commands. The Vrexian language appeared on the screen, but Earth's intelligence had cracked their written script years ago. Drain cycle. Release subject. Emergency revival protocol. The blue liquid began to lower. The woman's eyes fluttered open behind the breathing mask, unfocused and confused. Jake moved to the tank as it opened, catching her as she stumbled forward. "Easy," he said, removing her breathing apparatus. "Lieutenant Morrison, Earth Recon Corps. You're safe now." She coughed up blue liquid, gasping, "Lieutenant Sophie Grant." "Lieutenant Sophie Grant. Medical Research Division, they took me 8 months ago during a supply run to Europa Station. Can you walk?" Sophie nodded, though her legs shook. Jake grabbed a medical blanket from a nearby table and wrapped it around her shoulders. She wore only a thin examination gown, her arms covered in injection marks and monitoring patches. "How many others?" Jake asked. "I don't know. I heard them talking about other specimens in different sections. They keep us separated." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. "They've been running neurological experiments, trying to understand human adaptability and problem-solving. They think our brains are primitive but useful." Jake helped her to a storage locker and found a Vrexian environment suit. Too large, but better than nothing. "Get dressed. We're leaving." "The ship is under attack," Sophie said, pulling on the suit. "I heard the alarms before they sedated me last time. Not under attack. Being liberated." Jake moved to the medical bay's computer terminal. Earth sent a battle group. 12 warships, all equipped with reverse-engineered Vrexian technology. We're done being victims. He accessed the ship's internal network. Security was degraded from battle damage, and the Vrexians had never imagined a human would be loose on their ship with technical knowledge. Sloppy. The terminal displayed a schematic. Detention sections. Research labs. Specimen holding areas. "There," Sophie said, pointing to a section 3 decks down. "Cold storage. I overheard Zara talking about keeping humans in stasis there. Long-term subjects." Jake's jaw tightened. "How many?" she said. 20? 7. The ship shuddered violently. Something big had hit them. Probably a railgun strike from one of the Earth vessels. Jake steadied himself against the terminal and pulled up the internal sensor grid. Vrexian crew members were abandoning lower decks, flooding toward escape pods and the hangar bay. The bridge was still operational, but taking damage. Life support was failing in sections 4 through 9. "We need to reach cold storage," Jake said. "But first we need to make sure this ship doesn't jump away." Sophie's eyes widened. "You want to disable their hyperspace drive?" "I want to trap them here until our people finish boarding operations." Jake found what he was looking for on the schematic. Engineering deck, quantum drive chamber. "Can you handle a plasma cutter?" Sophie's smile was grim. "I was a structural engineer before they took me. Point me at what needs cutting." They moved back into the corridor. An explosion 2 sections over sent a shockwave through the deck plating. Jake grabbed a fallen Vrexian sidearm from the floor. A heavy energy pistol designed for claws, awkward in human hands but functional. "Stay close," he said. "If we run into resistance, drop and let me handle it. You're not combat trained." "Neither are you, technically," Sophie pointed out. "Recon Corps doesn't do assault operations." Jake checked the energy pistol's charge. "We do now." Everything changed when they started taking our people. Earth doesn't send diplomats anymore. We send soldiers who know how to smile while they gather intelligence. They reached an access shaft leading down. Jake pried open the hatch manually, the Vrexian metal groaning under the force. Below them, the shaft descended into darkness broken only by emergency strips. "After you," Sophie said. Jake dropped into the shaft, catching himself on a maintenance ladder. Sophie followed, her movements slower, but determined. They climbed down 2 decks in silence except for the distant sounds of battle and dying ship systems. The engineering deck was chaos. Plasma fires burned along one wall where a human missile had penetrated the hull. Vrexian engineers worked frantically to contain the damage, too busy to notice 2 humans emerging from the access shaft. Jake spotted the quantum drive chamber, a massive sphere of exotic matter contained in magnetic fields. Its surface rippled with impossible colors that hurt to look at directly. "There," he whispered. Sophie nodded. "Give me 3 minutes with their power distribution node, and that drive goes offline for hours." "You have 2 minutes," Jake said, watching Vrexian engineers starting to notice them. "We've got company." They took the human as a captive. Not knowing he would become their dot tech, Sophie sprinted toward the power distribution node, while Jake raised the energy pistol. 3 Vrexian engineers spotted them and reached for their tools, which doubled as weapons in emergencies. Jake fired twice. The first shot went wide, scorching a bulkhead. The second caught a Vrexian in the chest, and the alien went down shrieking. The other 2 scattered, one diving behind a control console, the other scrambling for an alarm panel. Jake couldn't let that alarm sound. Not yet. He launched himself forward, closing the distance before the Vrexian reached the panel. His shoulders slammed into the alien's midsection. Hollow bones, he reminded himself. The Vrexian folded with a crack Jake felt through his whole body. He grabbed the alien's communication device and crushed it under his heel. Energy fires sizzled past his head. The 3rd engineer had found a weapon. Jake rolled behind a support column as another shot melted metal where he'd been standing. He counted 3 seconds, then pivoted out and fired. Direct hit. The Vrexian collapsed. "Sophie, time check," he called. 90 seconds. "Their system architecture is different than I expected." Her hands flew over the alien interface. "They've got redundant safeties I need to bypass." Footsteps echoed from multiple corridors. Reinforcements coming. Jake moved to the engineering deck's main entrance and sealed it with an emergency lockdown command. That would buy them maybe 30 seconds before the Brexians overrode it from another terminal. He checked the energy pistol's charge. 40% remaining. Not enough for a sustained firefight. The sealed door started glowing as something cut through from the other side. Plasma torch. Professional. Sophie. 60 seconds. Almost there. Jake looked around the engineering bay for anything useful. His eyes landed on a coolant tank marked with Vrexian warning symbols. Pressurized liquid hydrogen, if he remembered the briefing correctly. He fired at the tank's base, twice. The 3rd shot punctured it. Supercooled liquid sprayed across the deck, instantly freezing everything it touched. Jake grabbed a damaged hull plate and held it like a shield as he backed towards Sophie's position. The cutting on the sealed door intensified. 30 seconds, Sophie said, her voice tight with concentration. The door exploded inward. 4 Vrexian soldiers poured through, weapons raised. They saw Jake immediately and opened fire. He ducked behind the hull plate as energy bolts hammered into it. The metal heated rapidly, becoming painful to hold. Jake threw the plate at the nearest soldier and dove sideways. He came up firing, caught one Vrexian in the leg. The alien went down but kept shooting. Return fire forced Jake behind a generator housing. Sophie. 10 seconds, don't rush me. A Vrexian flanked him, coming around the generator from the left. Jake spun and fired point blank. The alien's chest plate absorbed most of the blast, but the impact threw him backward into the frozen coolant spill. The Vrexian screamed as supercooled liquid flash froze his lower body. The other soldiers advanced, coordinating their fire to pin Jake down. He couldn't move without exposing himself. The energy pistol was down to 15% charge. Done, Sophie shouted. The quantum drive's humming changed pitch. rose to a whine, then cut off entirely. The engineering bay's lights dimmed as backup systems struggled to compensate for the sudden power redistribution failure. Jake used the moment of confusion. He burst from cover, firing as he ran. One Vrexian went down. Another's shot grazed his left arm, burning through skin. He ignored the pain and kept moving. Sophie was already at the access shaft. Jake reached her 3 seconds later, grabbed her hand, and pulled her into the opening. They fell, more than climbed, controlled descent turning into barely managed drop. They hit the deck below hard. Jake's ankle twisted but held. Cold storage, he gasped. Which direction? Sophie oriented herself, pointed left. 2 corridors down, then we take a maintenance tunnel. They ran. Behind them, Vrexian voices echoed down the access shaft. Pursuit was coming. The maintenance tunnel was barely large enough for humans, which meant Vrexians would struggle. Advantage. They crawled through on hands and knees, the metal cold against Jake's burned arm. His ankle throbbed with every movement. Sophie reached a vent first and kicked it open. They tumbled out into a corridor lined with doors. Each door had a small window and a control panel glowing with Vrexian script. Here, Sophie said, running to the 3rd door on the left. Jake looked through the window. Humans. Dozens of them. Suspended in vertical pods, frost covering the transparent panels. Men and women of all ages, all wearing the remnants of Earth uniforms or civilian clothes. Colonists. Researchers. Military personnel. All the people the Vrexians had stolen over the decades. Get them out, Jake ordered, covering the corridor with his nearly depleted energy pistol. Sophie worked the control panel. This is a master release. It'll wake everyone simultaneously. They'll be disoriented, maybe hypothermic. Do it anyway. We're not leaving anyone behind. She pressed the command sequence. The pods hissed open one by one. Humans stumbled out, coughing, shivering, confused. A man in the tattered remains of a mining colony uniform fell to his knees. A woman with gray hair and scientist insignia looked around with wild eyes. "Everyone listen," Jake called out. "I'm Lieutenant Jake Morrison, Earth Recon Corps. You've been rescued. Human forces are taking this ship. We need to get you to the hangar bay and onto evacuation shuttles." A younger man, maybe 25, stepped forward. Corporal Danny Wright, Earth Marines. Captured during the Tau Ceti incident 2 years ago. Despite his obvious weakness, he stood straight. "What do you need, sir?" Jake felt something release in his chest. Marines. Even after 2 years of captivity, still a Marine. "Can you walk?" "Yes, sir." "Then help the others. We move together." Danny nodded and started organizing the freed captives, his training overriding his physical condition. Sophie moved through the group, doing quick medical assessments, prioritizing who needed the most support. An explosion rocked the ship, closer than before. The lights flickered and stayed red. Jake's commandeered communicator crackled. He'd taken it from the first Vrexian engineer and hadn't thought to check it until now. A human voice came through, accented with Mars colony pronunciation. "Any friendlies aboard the Vrexian battlecruiser? This is Captain Lisa Chen of the Earth warship Defiance. We're preparing boarding parties. If you can hear this, signal your position." Jake keyed the communicator. "Captain Chen, this is Lieutenant Morrison. I have 29 rescued captives on detention level 3, section 7. We've disabled the quantum drive. Ship is yours." A pause. Then Chen's voice again, and Jake could hear the smile in it. "Well done, Lieutenant. Hold position. Boarding teams inbound." 2 minutes. Jake looked at the freed humans, at Sophie helping an elderly man to his feet, at Danny Wright supporting a wounded woman. They looked back at him with hope instead of despair. 2 minutes, people," Jake said. "Then we go home." They took the human as a captive. Not knowing he would become their .xt, the 2 minutes felt like hours. Jake positioned the freed captives in a defensive cluster at the corridor intersection, using overturned storage containers as makeshift barricades. Danny Wright had found a piece of broken pipe and held it like a club. Several others had armed themselves with whatever they could grab: tools, metal bars, even a fire suppression canister. "They're coming," Sophie said, pointing down the left corridor. Vrexian soldiers. 6 of them, moving in formation, energy rifles raised. They hadn't expected to find armed resistance. Their hesitation cost them. Jake fired his last charge into the lead soldier's weapon, overloading it. The rifle exploded, taking the Vrexian's arm with it. The alien's scream filled the corridor. Danny right through his pipe like a spear, catching another soldier in the faceplate. The Vrexian stumbled backward into his squad mates. "Now," Jake shouted. The freed captives surged forward. Not trained soldiers, but desperate people who'd been imprisoned and experimented on. Their rage made them fearless. A woman Jake didn't know tackled a Vrexian twice her size, slamming him into the wall repeatedly. An older man used the fire suppression canister to spray freezing foam into another alien's breathing vents. It was brutal. It was ugly. It was exactly what the Vrexians had taught humanity to become. The skirmish lasted 30 seconds. When it ended, the Vrexian soldiers were down, and the humans stood over them, breathing hard. One captive was injured, a deep cut across his shoulder. Sophie was already tending to him with torn strips of cloth. "Movement," Danny called out. Right corridor this time. But these weren't Vrexians. Human Marines in powered armor burst around the corner, weapons tracking for threats. The lead Marine's helmet bore captain's insignia. "Friendlies," Jake called out, raising his hands. "Lieutenant Morrison." These are rescued captives. The Marine captain's faceplate retracted, revealing a woman in her 40s with close-cropped black hair and a scar across her left cheek. "Captain Angela Torres, 2nd Marine Division. Good work, Lieutenant. We've secured the hangar bay and are pushing toward the bridge. Commander Kale is holed up there with his command staff. How many Vrexians are left?" "Rough estimate, about 40 combatants. Another 100 crew members have surrendered." Torres gestured to her squad. "Sergeant, get these people to the hangar." Medical team is standing by. The Marines formed a protective cordon around the captives. Jake started to follow, but Torres caught his arm. "Not you, Lieutenant. Captain Chen wants you on the bridge. She's got questions only you can answer." Jake looked at Sophie. She nodded. "Go. We'll be fine." He followed Torres and 3 Marines through corridors now controlled by Earth forces. They passed Vrexian crew members sitting with their hands bound, guarded by armed Marines. Some looked defiant. Most looked terrified. "We've been monitoring Vrexian communications for 6 hours, Torres explained as they walked. "Ever since our battle group dropped out of hyperspace. They've been sending distress calls to their home fleet. No response yet, but it's coming." "How long do we have?" "Intelligence estimates 12 hours before the Vrexian Defense Force arrives. Maybe less." Torres stopped at a sealed bulkhead. Beyond it, Jake could hear energy weapons fire. "The bridge is through here. Kale won't surrender. He's locked down all the command systems and threatened to self-destruct the ship." "Can he do that?" "Yes, but he hasn't yet. Chen thinks he's bluffing, trying to buy time for rescue." Torres handed Jake an energy rifle. "Standard Vrexian military issue? You know how to use it?" Jake checked the weapon. The mechanics were similar to Earth's new designs, unsurprising since they were based on captured Vrexian technology. "I'll manage." The bulkhead door blew inward. Marines poured through into a narrow access corridor. Energy fire met them immediately. 1 Marine went down, armor smoking. Another returned fire, suppressing the Vrexian position. Jake moved with the assault team, muscle memory from training taking over. The corridor opened into an antechamber outside the bridge. Vrexian soldiers had fortified the position with barricades and automated turrets. It was a killing ground. "Grenades," Torres ordered. Marines launched explosive charges over the barricades. The detonations shook the deck. Vrexian screams followed. The Marines advanced through the smoke, firing precise bursts. Jake stayed low, covering their left flank, A Vrexian soldier emerged from cover, charging with a blade weapon. Jake shot him twice. The alien went down hard. Another appeared from a side corridor, weapon tracking toward Torres. Jake's shot caught the Vrexian in the shoulder, spinning him around. Torres finished him. "Bridge door," a Marine called out. It was sealed, reinforced, designed to withstand boarding actions. Torres pulled out a plasma cutting torch. "This'll take 3 minutes." "We don't have 3 minutes," Jake said. He moved to the door's control panel and pulled the cover off, exposing the circuitry beneath. Rexian engineering, but he'd studied it for months. He pulled the micro tool from his molar and started rerouting connections. "What are you doing?" Torres asked. "These doors have safety overrides in case of fire or hull breach. I'm convincing the system there's a plasma leak on the bridge." Jake crossed 2 wires. The panel sparked. There, the door slid open. The bridge beyond was dark except for emergency lighting. Commander Kale stood at the command throne. One claw on a control panel Jake recognized as the self-destruct activation system. A dozen Vrexian officers surrounded him, weapons drawn. "Humans," Kale hissed. "You've destroyed my ship, killed my crew, violated every law of civilized space." A woman's voice answered from behind Jake. Captain Lisa Chen stepped onto the bridge, flanked by Marines. She was tall, athletic, with short brown hair and eyes like steel. "You're talking about civilized law, Commander. That's rich coming from a species that's been kidnapping and experimenting on humans for 40 years. Kale's mandibles spread in what might have been a laugh. "We took research subjects. Your species was useful. You should be honored to contribute to galactic science." "We're not subjects," Chen said quietly. "We're not specimens. We're humans, and you just taught us exactly how dangerous we can be when you push us too far." Kale's claw tightened on the self-destruct control. "I can destroy this entire ship, kill everyone aboard." "You'll die with us." Chen smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Go ahead. We've already evacuated our people. You'll kill yourself and your crew. We'll just salvage what's left and reverse engineer more of your technology. Every ship you destroy makes us stronger because we learn from the wreckage." For the first time, Kale's confidence wavered. His eyes darted to his officers, looking for support. They looked back with uncertainty. "It's over." Chen continued. "Your home fleet is 12 hours away. In 12 hours, we'll be gone with your ship, your technology, and every piece of data in your computers. Earth is done being prey. From now on, we're predators. And you taught us how." Kale's claw moved toward the activation button. 3 things happened simultaneously. Jake fired, hitting Kale's hand. Torres threw a stun grenade. Chen's Marines opened fire on the Vrexian officers. When the smoke cleared, Kale was on the deck, clutching his ruined hand. His officers were down, disarmed, restrained. The bridge was silent except for the hum of damaged systems. Chen walked to Kale and looked down at him. "You're going to survive, Commander. We're taking you and your crew back to Earth. You're going to stand trial for crimes against humanity. And then you're going to watch as we use everything we learned from you to make sure no species ever treats humans as prey again." She turned to Jake. "Lieutenant Morrison, I'm told you orchestrated this entire operation from inside a detention cell." "I had help, Captain. Nonetheless." Chen's expression softened slightly. "Well done. Earth owes you." Jake looked around the captured bridge at the defeated Vrexian commander, at the human Marines standing victorious in an alien warship. "We're even, Captain. I just wanted to go home. They took the human as a captive. Not knowing he would become their .tech 6 months later, Jake stood in the observation deck of Earth's orbital station above Geneva. Below him, the planet turned in endless blue and green. Clouds scattered across familiar continents. Behind him, the trial chamber buzzed with activity as delegates from 40 species took their seats. Commander Kale sat in a containment field at the center of the chamber, his scales dulled, his eyes hollow. Beside him sat the Vrexian council members who'd authorized the human abduction program. 12 aliens who'd treated humanity like livestock. Sophie Grant stood next to Jake, her arm linked through his. She'd recovered fully, though the scars from the implants remained. She wore them proudly now, reminders of what they'd survived. "Nervous?" she asked. "No," Jake said honestly. "This was never about revenge. It's about making sure it never happens again." The trial had lasted 3 months. Evidence presented included testimony from 87 rescued humans, medical records of experimentation, communication logs proving systematic abduction campaigns, and data from Vrexian computers showing they'd taken over 400 humans across 40 years. The Galactic Council had tried to intervene, claiming Earth lacked jurisdiction. Captain Chen had responded by broadcasting everything publicly across every communication network humanity could access. Within days, 12 other species came forward with similar stories of Vrexian abductions and experiments. The Council's authority crumbled overnight. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Presiding Judge Catherine Brooks. Judge Brooks entered, a woman in her 60s who'd lost her daughter to a Vrexian raid 15 years ago. She'd recused herself twice before finally accepting the position when no other judge could be found with clean emotional distance. Everyone on Earth had been affected. "This tribunal finds the defendants guilty on all counts," Brooks said, her voice steady. "Crimes against sapient beings, unauthorized medical experimentation, kidnapping across interstellar borders, and conspiracy to suppress technological development of a sovereign species." Kale didn't react. He'd known the verdict before the trial started. "Sentencing will be as follows," Brooks continued. "The defendants will serve life imprisonment on a secure facility, with labor details focused on rebuilding what they destroyed. They will work to compensate the families of victims. They will have no contact with Vrexian territory. And most importantly, they will serve as a reminder that humanity is no longer prey." She looked directly at Kale. "You came to our system thinking we were primitive. You took our people thinking we were helpless. You experimented on us thinking we couldn't fight back. You were wrong on all counts. History will remember this moment as the day humanity stopped being victims and became equals." The chamber erupted in applause, not just from humans, but from delegates of other species who'd suffered similar fates. Jake watched Kale being led away and felt nothing but tired satisfaction. Danny Wright appeared at Jake's shoulder, now fully recovered and back in uniform. "Captain Chen wants to see you, both of you." They found Chen in her ready room aboard the Defiance, now permanently stationed as Earth's flagship. The ship hung in high orbit, its weapons trained on approaching vessels, its sensors scanning for threats. Earth didn't trust easily anymore. "Lieutenant Morrison, Lieutenant Grant," Chen greeted them. Sophie had accepted a commission after the rescue, her engineering expertise too valuable to waste. "I have new orders for you both." She activated a holographic display. It showed a star map with 37 systems highlighted in red. "These are confirmed locations of other species conducting abduction programs, some targeting humans, some targeting other developing civilizations. Earth has decided we're not going to wait for the Galactic Council to act." "You want us to infiltrate them?" Jake said. "I want you to lead infiltration teams. Train others to do what you did. Get captured deliberately, gather intelligence, wait for rescue." Chen's smile was sharp. "We're going to dismantle every abduction program in this sector. We're going to free every captive. And we're going to make it very clear that humanity protects not just ourselves, but anyone who can't protect themselves." Sophie looked at Jake. He looked back. They'd both earned medical discharges if they wanted them. They could retire, go home, try to rebuild normal lives. "When do we start?" Sophie asked. Chen's smile widened. "Immediately. We've got intelligence on a Cathari slaving operation in the Proxima sector. They've been taking human colonists and selling them as servants. I'm sending a team in 3 weeks. I want you running tactical planning." Jake felt the familiar rush of purpose. "We'll need Vrexian technology for the infiltration. The Cathari will scan for anything Earth standard." "Already arranged. We've got a dozen captured Vrexian ships we retrofitted. complete with authentic distress beacons. Chen handed them data tablets. Mission parameters are there. Read them, plan the operation, pick your team, show them what happens when you take humans captive. They left the ready room and headed for the training facility. Through the windows, Jake could see Earth vessels moving in formation, practicing maneuvers. Humanity's fleet, built in secret over 40 years, now openly patrolling their territory. "You know this won't stop," Sophie said. "There will always be another species that thinks we're easy targets." "Good," Jake replied. "Let them come, let them try. Every single one that does will learn the same lesson the Vrexians learned. Humans aren't prey anymore. We're the ones who rescue prey from predators." They reached the training facility where their new team waited. 15 volunteers, all survivors of abduction or relatives of victims, all determined to make sure no one else suffered what they'd endured. Jake looked at them and saw the future of humanity, not conquerors, not empire builders, but protectors, defenders, people who'd been pushed too far and pushed back harder. "Listen up," he called out. "You're here because someone took something from you. Family, freedom, time you'll never get back. We can't undo that. But we can make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else, human or otherwise." He activated a tactical display showing the Cathari slaving operation: ships, routes, facilities, guard rotations. Intelligence gathered from intercepted communications and rescued captives. "In 3 weeks, we're going to let the Cathari capture us. We're going to let them think we're helpless, and then we're going to teach them the most important lesson in the galaxy." Jake met each team member's eyes. Humanity doesn't forget. Humanity doesn't forgive, and humanity always comes back for its own. Sophie stepped forward. "They took us as captives, not knowing we'd become their nightmare. Let's make sure every slaver in this sector learns that lesson. Let's show them what humans really are." The team roared approval. Outside the windows, Earth turned beneath them, blue and green and beautiful. A planet that had been prey for too long and had finally learned to bite back. Jake smiled. The Vrexians had wanted to study human adaptability. They'd gotten their answer. Humans adapted by becoming exactly what the galaxy feared most: survivors who refused to stay victims, prey that evolved into apex predators, captives who became liberators. They'd taken the human as a captive, not knowing he would become their teacher. And the lesson was simple: never underestimate humanity's capacity for turning weakness into strength, fear into fury, and captivity into revolution. The galaxy was learning that lesson now.